The HOA president thought she could bully my 78-year-old grandfather with threats and bogus fines, just for walking his dog. But what she didn't know was that this so-called pet once served in a special police unit, and he still remembered how to protect what mattered. 3 years ago, my grandfather rescued a retired canine named Rex. To us, he was family, a gentle, loyal companion who had seen more than most people ever would. But to the HOA, he was a threat. They didn't see the calm presence that comforted a widowed veteran. They saw a dangerous breed that didn't belong. It started small, a warning letter for barking, a complaint about leash length. Then came the fines, the accusations, the threats of legal action. They even proposed a rule banning all dogs over 50 pounds, knowing full well Rex was 78 of pure muscle and discipline. But what they failed to realize was that Rex wasn't just any dog. He had been trained to chase down armed suspects, detect explosives, and defend his handler at all costs. And when the HOA president made the mistake of confronting my grandfather face to face, Rex didn't hesitate. He didn't bark. He warned. The kind of warning that stops evil in its tracks. It started like a slow drip. At first, we didn't even notice it for what it was, just a few oddly specific letters in the mailbox. One fined my grandfather $50 because Rex barked at a squirrel during his morning walk. Another one cited him for not having Rex on a certified HOA-approved leash, whatever that meant. And then came the accusation that Rex had an aggressive appearance, as if a dog's breed could be judged like a crime. My grandfather, the most peaceful man I know, who raised 3 kids and buried a wife with grace, was suddenly being painted as a threat to the community. Not because of anything he did, but because of the dog who never left his side. Rex, who followed commands to the letter, who didn't bark unless there was danger, who had more discipline than most people I know. That's when Karen got involved. Karen was the HOA president, and not just in title. She carried herself like a queen whose kingdom was threatened. She started showing up near the property. At first it was casual, walking her dog near the fence line, lingering a bit too long. Then it became obvious. She would stand across the street with her phone raised, snapping pictures of Rex through the slats in the fence. She'd call in safety checks and report violations that didn't exist. Once she followed them during their walk, clipboard in hand, writing notes like some kind of animal control investigator. Then came the complaint. Karen filed a formal notice with the HOA board claiming that Rex had lunged at her. She said he displayed predatory behavior, even though he was on a leash in our front yard and never even stepped past the property line. My grandfather was stunned. She demanded Rex be relocated, as if he were some threat to public safety. And if my grandfather refused, he'd be in violation of community safety regulations and subject to immediate housing review, a fancy way of saying they were going to evict him. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Why target an old man and his rescue dog? Why escalate things this far? So I started digging. What I found changed everything. Karen had been in office for nearly 4 years, and during that time, HOA fees had increased steadily. But nothing ever seemed to improve. In fact, the common areas were falling apart. Broken sprinkler heads, patchy landscaping, security gates that hadn't worked in over a year. So where was the money going? Turns out Karen had been using HOA funds to finance renovations on her own property. Backyard additions, a luxury patio, even a small pool, filed under Community Wellness Project. And the worst part? She had been pushing out older residents one by one. Anyone who didn't fit her version of a picture-perfect neighborhood. Anyone she couldn't control. The complaints, the fines, the rule changes, they weren't about safety. They were about power. She saw Rex as a challenge, a symbol of something she couldn't dominate. And she saw my grandfather, a soft-spoken veteran, as an easy target. Someone who wouldn't fight back. But she was wrong. Because Rex wasn't just a pet. He was a former police K-9, trained in protection, search and rescue, and defensive tactics. He knew when something was off. He could sense tension, hostility, fear, and he had been watching Karen just as closely as she'd been watching him. Every time she stepped near the property, his posture would shift, calm, controlled, but alert. the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. And my grandfather, he may have been tired, he may have been old, but he wasn't broken. He had fought too many battles in life to let some petty tyrant take away the only family he had left. Still, the pressure mounted. Karen sent final notices, threatened legal action, pushed for an emergency HOA board vote to enact a new pet behavior ordinance that would ban any animal with documented behavioral incidents, a rule that only applied to Rex. She thought she had him backed into a corner. But what Karen didn't know, what no one on that board knew, was that Rex had a past filled with commendations, service medals, and citations for bravery. A dog who had tracked down armed fugitives, rescued missing children, saved the life of an officer during a home invasion. And when she pushed too far, that past would come back in a way no one saw coming. Because the moment she tried to make her move, Rex would remind everyone that he may have been retired, but he was never ever defenseless, and neither was the man he protected. For weeks, we let Karen dig her own hole. Every letter she sent, every petty violation, every time she stepped 1 foot too close to the fence, I documented all of it. Time-stamped photos, audio recordings of her threats, and video footage from a small camera we mounted near the front gate. It wasn't just for defense, it was for truth. Because when people like her feel untouchable, the only thing that humbles them is cold, hard proof. She thought she had control over everything, that because she wore a title and ran a board of hand-picked neighbors, she could wield power like a weapon. But what she didn't know, I wasn't just a bystander. I had spent years working in municipal law, quietly behind the scenes. I knew how HOA policies worked. I knew what they could and couldn't do. And more importantly, I knew exactly what kind of behavior could get someone removed from their position, publicly and legally. And Rex, he was patient through all of it, loyal as ever. But something in him had changed. Every time Karen approached the gate, he stiffened, not out of fear, but instinct. His ears would lock forward, his tail would raise, not wagging, but steady, not threatening, but ready. You could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just watching, he was reading her. Then came the day she went too far. It was a humid afternoon. My grandfather had just returned from a walk with Rex and was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea. Karen stormed up the path, not bothering to ring the bell, not even knocking. She marched right through the front gate as if she owned the place. She held up a clipboard and announced that she was conducting a compliance inspection, a complete lie. She claimed there were multiple complaints, and she had the right to inspect the property grounds. Before my grandfather could even rise from his chair, Rex moved. No barking, no panic, just motion, fast and deliberate. He placed himself between Karen and the porch, his stance firm, his body square, head low. A low, guttural growl rolled from his chest, and for the first time, Karen froze. She raised her voice, tried to act unfazed, told my grandfather to control his animal. But Rex didn't flinch. His gaze stayed locked. Every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. Then he barked. Once. Loud. Echoing through the yard like a shotgun blast. Karen stumbled back, visibly shaken, and screamed that she was calling animal control. She said Rex had attacked her, though he hadn't moved a single inch beyond his defensive line. She stormed off the property, phone to her ear, already weaving a story filled with lies and exaggerations. Animal control arrived within the hour. A patrol car pulled up behind them. My grandfather stood calmly on the porch, Rex at his side, completely composed. The officer stepped out of the car, glanced at the report in his hand, and then looked at Rex. That's when everything changed. Wait a second, he said, walking closer. This your dog? My grandfather nodded. The officer crouched down, smiled, and said softly, You remember me, boy? Rex's tail gave a single thump. The officer stood and turned to the animal control tech. He's retired K9, he said. This dog saved my partner during a meth bust 2 years ago. Took down a suspect armed with a hunting knife. Held him until backup arrived. I'd trust this dog with my life. Karen, who had been standing proudly near the sidewalk, waiting for the show she expected to unfold, went absolutely still. Her face lost all color. That's "That can't be the same dog," she muttered. The officer gave her a long, cold look. "You filed a false report on a service animal with a decorated law enforcement record," he said. "That's a serious offense." She stammered something about neighborhood safety, but the damage was done. I handed over the files, every letter, every incident, every recording, the footage from that very day. The officer reviewed it quietly, nodding once before handing it back. "This isn't about a dog," he said. "This is targeted harassment." Karen didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. That was the twist. That moment right there. She thought she was about to win, thought she could destroy an old man's peace and dignity for no reason other than control. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. She didn't know that Rex had already faced down people far more dangerous than her, and won. And now the game had completely changed. With the officer's testimony and a stack of evidence too thick to ignore, the tide had finally started to turn. What began as petty fines and quiet threats had now grown into something bigger, something we could no longer afford to treat as personal drama. This wasn't just about my grandfather or even Rex anymore. It was about everyone Karen had bullied, manipulated, and pushed out of their homes. So we opened an investigation, formally and legally. The officer, to his credit, didn't treat this like some neighborly squabble. He connected us with a city inspector and a legal liaison for HOA accountability. They combed through records, interviewed residents, pulled years' worth of complaints, financial statements, and internal communications. It didn't take long before the cracks turned into craters. Karen had been running the HOA like a personal kingdom, and worse, she had been using her power to quietly push elderly and disabled residents out of their homes by creating a pattern of noncompliance. She'd flag them for fabricated violations, pile on fines, and intimidate them with legal language most people didn't understand. Then, just when they felt cornered, she or her business partner would approach with a friendly offer to buy their home for below market value, promising relief from the stress. It was a scam, cold, calculated, and masked behind policy. And she'd gotten away with it for years, but not anymore. We compiled everything into a full report: the false violation codes, testimonies from residents who had been targeted, HOA emails where Karen casually mentioned encouraging turnover in the community, and of course the footage, every confrontation, every moment she trespassed, every threat she made at my grandfather. When it was time to present our case, we didn't just submit it quietly. We brought it directly to the HOA meeting. That night, the community hall was packed wall to wall. For the first time in years, people who had kept their heads down showed up, their faces tight with anger and silent anticipation. The board sat at their long folding table, looking more nervous than usual. Karen, in her usual power suit and smug posture, sat dead center, oblivious to what was coming. I stood before the crowd, cleared my throat, and began with the facts. No theatrics, just the truth. I laid out the violations, the illegal code changes, the misused HOA funds, the personal targeting. People gasped when they saw the email where Karen referred to Rex as a ticking time bomb, and my grandfather as a liability to the neighborhood aesthetic. Then I played the footage. There she was on screen, screaming at my grandfather through the fence, tugging on the locked gate, threatening to take that beast away, while Rex stood firm, never crossing the line, never moving beyond his command. You could hear the pure rage in her voice. You could see the calm restraint in Rex's posture. And then came the final nail, the testimony from the responding officer, played via recording. "This dog saved my partner's life. He is not dangerous. He is disciplined. He is a protector. And what's happening here isn't about safety. It's about control, about abuse of power. I stand behind this dog and this family." Karen's face went pale. She tried to respond, claimed the video was edited, claimed the officer was biased, claimed I was fabricating evidence to smear her name, but no one bought it anymore. Because in that room sat people who had received the same threats, who had lost money, peace, and in some cases their homes because of her tactics. The only difference now was that someone had finally fought back and brought receipts. By the end of the meeting, the vote was unanimous. Karen was stripped of her title and forced to step down. Her renovation projects, which had been funded with HOA money under the label of community development, were immediately frozen pending a full audit. But the best part? The board issued a formal apology to my grandfather. They offered to clear all fines and revise the HOA rules to protect service animals, retired or not. And as a final gesture, the local police department awarded Rex a community service medal, citing his continued protection of vulnerable residents and his role in exposing misconduct. Rex didn't need a medal. He didn't care for applause. But as he sat there beside my grandfather, ears perked, head high, you could feel it in the room. Respect, justice, and something even deeper. Redemption. Karen left that night in silence. No smug goodbye. No final word. Just the sound of folding chairs, slow claps, and the quiet shuffle of a woman who finally realized she had crossed the wrong line. And as for Rex, he got a fresh steak dinner, a new chew toy, and a long nap at my grandfather's feet. But this time, with no one watching through the fence. After everything, the neighborhood changed. The HOA rules were rewritten from the ground up, clearer, fairer, and for the first time, human. Seniors got the respect they deserved. Service animals, retired or active, were granted full protections. And my grandfather. He walks Rex every single morning, head held high, nodding to neighbors who once looked the other way. No more warnings, no more threats. Just quiet peace and the loyal shadow of a dog who'd already proven what loyalty really means. But peace never lasts forever. A few weeks ago, we heard Karen had resurfaced, just 3 blocks away. New street, new community. And according to a few nervous whispers, she's already started building a new HOA board. With the same manipulative rules, the same tactics, and the same hunger for control. Some people never learn. So tell me, what would you do if your rescue dog saved your neighborhood from someone like her? Drop your story in the comments. Smash the like button if you believe in second chances. For people, for justice, and for dogs like Rex. And if you think this story was wild, wait until you hear about the HOA president who tried to bulldoze a veterans memorial until karma bulldozed her first.